when you start to see the evolution of advertising, I put together some quotes from the different analysts just to show you how there's starting to become more players in the space. And sort of the traditional definitions range from broad to specific. So we'll go over a few of these quotes. Intermediaries that enable advertisers to reach audiences across the web and allow publishers to better monetize inventory. Aggregates advertising inventory from a number of websites and sell this inventory to advertisers or agencies. Brokers of online inventory, ad networks will buy inventory from a publisher, then resell to an advertiser, pocketing the spread. When you sort of see how the landscape is evolving as new types of players emerge, DSPs eliminate the typical broker role by linking publishers directly with advertisers via managed transaction platform for smart purchasing. Rep firms market inventory from select publishers to advertisers, functioning more as an outsourced sales force than a reseller. And so you can start to see there's more and more players coming into the ecosystem, and it's important to understand who they are, what they do, and how it can help you buy more effectively. This is just another graph to show you how data is really the difference here when you're looking at DSPs, when you're looking at exchanges and data exchanges, and how the trends of ad networks, that really they're differentiating themselves by the data, the proprietary data that they have access to. I think it's really important for you to understand what marketers want, what their goals are. Different marketers have different needs. If you look at brand marketers in the first column, brand intent, they're looking for awareness and exposure to sort of get the largest reach out there. Then you can see sort of the call to action marketers that are looking for some awareness, but they're looking for near-term action. And then you start to see the direct response marketers that are looking for actual conversions right off the bat, right there instantly. So a lot of the lead gen types of platforms and for all the different verticals. So traditional media buying process is definitely evolved over the years. So if you look, if you look back a couple years ago, this is what it would look like. The buyer decides what websites to buy. The buyer and seller negotiate that deal. They hand off to internal teams for the workflow. The buyer ad ops sends ads to the publisher. The seller ad ops inputs the ads through the web trafficking. Buyer reviews the results and compares reports and compiles data. The seller sends the bill to the buyer, and the buyer reconciles the bill and pays. So the ability to drive incremental value from data and targeting depends on 4 key elements. So it's essentially the value. Do the insights of the data really help the advertisers meet their key goals? Privacy. Can the data be used in ways that consumers are okay with? Uniqueness. What unique data is available for use? If you're able to get that same data from multiple networks or multiple places, how valuable is that data really? And capability. Can the provider process that data? So here's an overview of the digital value chain. So you look at the advertisers and agencies, the different inventory influencers, which are the data providers we'll dig deeper into, the publishers and distribution platforms, and then reporting. So as you start to dig deeper in here, you'll see that within agencies, you start to get the creative execution and the strategy. You start to see the agency support buyers. Inventory influencers, you'll start to see a lot more of the data clearinghouses. And what does that really look like? You can see it starts to get more and more complex. We'll just highlight a few areas. So the agency support buyers, essentially single source bid management tools. Automated system that manages and optimizes bid words for advertisers, algorithm-based platforms that maximize ROI on ad network and exchange inventory buys on behalf of brands. When you look at the data clearinghouses, they're not directly involved in the buying and selling of advertising, but they either facilitate the transfer of data between the parties of the value chain or aggregate data from several parties and make it available to different players in the value chain. So how does this all stack up? We talked about all the different players within the media stack, and how does that dollar sort of evolve all the way down to the publisher? So here's a quick overview. Obviously, it varies for different advertisers, different buys. You can say the advertiser is paying a $5 CPM, and now you go, the agency is going to take their cut, let's say 50 cents. The ad network will take that and will keep $2 of that for their services that they're providing to the publishers. The data provider, if the advertiser needs access to certain segments, they're probably going to be paying someone like a Blue Kai or Exalate, 25 cents. Then you see, if the ad network themselves doesn't have access to that inventory and they need to leverage the data provider to go find more users, they'll start to look on exchanges, which it has an additional fee of 35 cents. Ad serving, when you start using rich media like iBlast, Point Roll, there's rich media ad serving fees. So let's take another 10 cents for that. So at the end of the day, after the advertiser spends $5 CPM, to get the actual users, the publisher only receives about $1.80 CPM. Now, if you start to say, okay, well, how do we optimize media buying more efficiently? If you're a media buyer and you're looking at making a buy through different networks, you go to maybe ValueClick, Ad.com, Traffic Marketplace. How do you know if they're buying the same inventory across all these different sites? Are they leveraging the same exchanges? Are you targeting the same users over and over again? You might be frequency capping on one platform individually, but together you could probably be targeting the same users because there's no way for individual networks to start to match up that same audience. And that's where DSPs, demand-side platforms, have sort of entered, and they're making that buying process more efficient. And you can see here, what that does is it allows you to cut out the ad networks, lower the actual cost to the advertiser. In this particular case, it's $4.20. And you can see the net outcome ends up being $2.15 to the publisher. On the grand scheme of things, it becomes really important for a media buyer and agency to really know how effective their buys are becoming. Of the media buyers and planners here, how many people are actually purchasing on DSPs today? Anyone? No. Okay. So is everyone here familiar with exchanges? Essentially, exchanges allow publishers to provide a slice of their inventory to exchanges so that advertisers can select just that inventory they want, sometimes calculating value from upwards of 50 data elements. What makes them so interesting to the industry? Real-time bidding technologies that can both cherry-pick inventory and provide immediate feedback. So the notion of real-time bidding is holding, for example, an eBay auction for every ad impression that happens on a website. So there could be multiple advertisers looking to target the same users. And essentially in real time, you'll get to bid for that specific user, for access to that user. The value that brings is now you're no longer looking at just buying specific inventory across websites, but you're actually targeting the users that matter most to you. The typical exchange margins, bare bone exchanges typically receive only 5 to 10% of the revenue on impressions, but they start to increase value by adding different data parameters and different targeting abilities. Networks themselves, who are the current middlemen, end up pocketing about 25 to 50% of that margin. DSPs, why are they important? Who are they? So let's start by naming a few that you might be pretty familiar with already. Turn, X+1, MediaMath, AppNexus. These are all different platforms that will allow you to buy on the same ad networks that you probably already buy with today. They'll help you reach the actual direct publishers, so you can reach sites like a Yahoo and MSN, as well as being able to reach data through different ad exchanges like Right Media, as well as multiple platforms. So, DSPs essentially, they're bringing all accounts into one tool for centralized management and reporting. When you look at yourself from a media buying standpoint, now you'll know exactly how efficient your buys are becoming, because you'll be able to control what's happening across all your different ad networks or all your different sites without having any overlap. So how do advertisers use data, and why is that important? So being able to sort through dozens of impressions and attributes and cherry pick impressions to buy. So you'll see a lot of ad networks, what they'll do when you're making specific buys for audiences, they'll start to go to different websites, maybe like a MySpace or whatever it might be, and they'll cherry pick audiences from that. So you can buy at very low CPMs, and they can cherry pick the exact users they want and pay that same lower CPM based on the data they know about those users. What that does is it allows the advertiser to reach the audiences that they want, and it allows them to make the most profit. I thought it might be interesting to go over two current data pricing models from two of the largest data exchanges. BlueKai essentially does a cost per cookie with a simple auction model. Cookies with series of data about users are auctioned for around $2 to $3 CPM, and buying that cookie for as long as the cookie lives, which is also very important that I'll go into shortly. And Exalate, another data provider, does it by percent of spend. So the data provider receives a percentage of that media value, which is currently around 20%. So how does this really work? How do ad networks leverage different data? So as a data buyer, InterClick, which is an ad network, supplemented its own vertical market data with BlueKai in-market auto data to identify an audience of auto prospects who displayed intent to purchase a specific type of car from its clients and competitive brands. The BlueKai data return a response rate 200 to 300% greater than ordinarily achieved with traditional contextual or demographic targeting. If you want to look, when you look at BlueKai, their data is so granular, you'll know they'll be able to tell you who's not only interested in cars, but who's interested in purchasing a new car, or who's interested in just looking at exotic cars. So that also helps make your buys more effectively, because now you're not just targeting vertical channels on ad networks. You're not targeting just automotive or travel. You're targeting people that are actually interested in buying an airline ticket or buying a car. So as you start to as advertisers start to evolve and say, okay, well, now I'm used to buying web, and now mobile is picking up with all the applications that are out there and the constant reach. How is that, and then you've got the TVs as well. So how do I use this three-screen ad approach, and what's the most important, how do I reach my audience across these multiple platforms? How can I leverage the data and the learnings I know on the web and bring that to mobile? Here's just an idea that shows you how you can compare the different data available on mobile, internet, and TV. To give you an idea of how this might be used in the future, you could take a look at Amazon, for example. Say you're on your phone, you're browsing the Amazon iPhone app, you click on a DVD for X-Men. And you click around, you add it to your shopping cart, you decide not to buy it for whatever reason. Maybe you don't want to enter in your credit card information on your phone. It's not as easy to make that purchase. Maybe you were driving or whatever it might be. So now imagine how interesting it would be when you're back at your desktop and you get an ad for Amazon that says, hey, remember this DVD that you looked at? And that purchase is probably much more likely to happen when you're at your desktop. You have more time. You're used to that platform for making purchases. The same thing can be said for airline tickets or any purchase for that matter. So today there's a lot of people that are exploring how to do this based on different unique IDs. It hasn't happened yet, but I think it's definitely something that will happen within the next year. So data and cookies, right? This is essentially what we're talking about when you're trying to match users across different mediums, the web, the PC, and the mobile, or being able to build those data profiles around users. So to give you an idea of exactly how people build these audience profiles, let's take a cookie, for example, simple web cookie. And when you're browsing around the web, these data providers or ad networks are going to anonymously track what you're doing. So if you break it down at a very high level, they'll give you interest points for everything that you do on the web. So say you browse a travel website, you'll get 1 point. You click on a sports ad, you'll get 2 points. You you buy movie tickets, you'll get 3 points. And you can sort of see it now in travel. You've got 1 interest level. Sports, you've got 2. Making an actual purchase will make it even stronger. They usually renew that data every 30 days to keep it very current. And now you have this. You start to get this profile based on probably over 20 to 50 different variables. So things like how much time you spend on those sites, what types of things you click on, what category of websites you browse, what categories within those sites. So if you're surfing Yahoo, you'll be able to track the differences between the different categories that you're looking at as well to build those. One of the big issues that always comes up is people get very worried about cookies and private PII, personally identifiable information. So to make it pretty clear is there's no way for any ad network to identify your name, your phone number, your address, your email address. All it is the random number with random digits, and only the ad network that sets that cookie can actually access that data. So there's no way for other parties to read that. So if ValueClick is an ad network was to set a cookie on your computer, ad.com would not be able to leverage that cookie. And that's where these data exchanges become very valuable, because now you're able to get a much larger range of data by buying against those users. So one of the other issues with cookies is they're not constant. And there's, users tend to delete those cookies every so often. Some people don't opt into those cookies. And, so it shortens that, it makes that audience even smaller. So if you take a look at, typical website, let's just say the New York Times, for example, what they did is they did a quick study on how many people are actually deleting these cookies. And they were able to track, drop cookies on everyone that logs into the website on a daily basis. And then they track those same users on a daily basis to see, are people setting those cookies when they log in, or are they deleting the cookies, not setting those cookies, and rejecting them? And they're able to identify that based on every time the user logs in. And just to give you some idea, when the study was done even broader, there's some sites on nearly 50% cookie deletion. How many people in here have seen this slide here on the digital advertising ecosystem? Great. So there's a few of you. This was actually put out by Luma Partners. It's an ongoing, living, breathing sort of chart that people will constantly add to in the web ecosystem. And it really shows you how dollars go from the advertising side to the publisher side, what are all the different technology platforms, and who the players are. Since most of you haven't seen it, you'll see on the left-hand side there's the agencies and media buying desks. There's a creative optimization, so people like Tumri and Terracent that will help you optimize your creatives based on the data that you have against the users. So now it's not even targeting specific ads based on the data. You can actually build a creative in real time based on that data you know about someone. So now if you know, so let's take one advertiser, for example. We'll go back to BMW, and they start to buy data off of Blue Kai for, let's say a young, let's say an athlete versus a soccer mom. Now what you can start to do is build that creative by changing the car size, car color, car type. You can change the text that's on the creative. And all this is done in real time. These guys literally will build those creatives on the fly based on the data that you're buying against, which again goes back to people like Blue Kai and Exalate, etc. Another area is the media buying desks. So now agencies, there's media buying desks that sort of evolved to help agencies actually buy more effectively across DSPs and across ad networks and ad exchanges. So not only is that another layer that adds in the mix, because before agencies could go directly to DSPs and make purchases, but what would happen is they would start to buy from multiple DSPs because they don't know which ones are performing most effectively. So in comes people like Cadreon and Vivikai and MIG to help these agencies buy more effectively, not only on just DSPs, but also against the proprietary websites that they have partnerships with. And what you start to see is you start to see networks becoming squeezed even farther down the value chain. You can look at ad exchanges again, and ad exchanges still become very important because you're looking at buying specific audiences, whether it's in real time or not, but being able to reach those users at an effective cost rather than buying specific categories themselves, in specific sites themselves. Ad networks, you're all familiar with, but you can start to break those down into vertical ad networks for people like Glam that are targeting women, Jumpstart that are targeting automotive websites that are really focused on that. So now, should you really focus on going to ValueClick and buying a specific channel, or is it better to start going to these vertical networks and spending your money there? On the mobile space, what's pretty interesting here is you can see mobile is sort of combined into just one group that says mobile. But obviously, a lot of these players here are starting to break off into mobile. Everyone wants to be a part of mobile. And you'll start to see the same sort of chart is evolving for mobile that I'll show you shortly. Something else that's pretty interesting is from the publisher side platforms. So people like PubMatic and AdMeld, that they help publishers optimize their inventory more effectively. So from a publisher standpoint, how do I make sure I'm maximizing my revenue? How do I make sure I'm calling the right ad network for every impression that I have available? It's very hard to do manually, but people like PubMatic, Rubicon, and AdMeld will actually allow you to take will basically guarantee you a higher eCPM, and they charge the publisher a 10% rev share for access to that technology. So here's sort of a slide around the mobile advertising ecosystem. Again, you'll probably start to see this evolve more and more frequently. So on the publisher side, you have these supply-side platforms, including Mobclix, that basically aggregate mobile inventory. One of the hardest things to do is there's so many applications out there with the explosion of the app stores on Android and iPhone and Windows Phone 7. So from a network standpoint, being able to access all those individual applications means you need to have SDKs in all those individual apps themselves. From an ad network standpoint, it's very difficult to go out and do that because it's not the same as dropping JavaScript ad tags in the web. On the application side, you actually have to insert your code. Let's say iTunes on the iOS platform, for example. You have to insert the ad network's code. You have to QA it, push out an update to the App Store. That could take anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks. If you're an ad network or an agency and you want to make a buy on a specific application, it needs to happen instantly. You can't wait for this black box period that Apple might put you through. And that's where these supply-side platforms become really valuable because you can access that publisher inventory right off the bat. The same thing goes for sort of the rich media. Just like you have iBlaster and PointRoll and a lot of the rich media providers in the online world, you have very similar sorts of rich media people in the mobile components. So people like Crisp and MediaLets are really looking at figuring out how do they allow advertisers to buy the same iAd like rich media ad experiences that you see through Apple themselves. Ad networks, as you know, there's many mobile ad networks that are focused strictly on mobile. But what's happening now is every network wants to have their mobile reach as well. So they do that in a couple ways. They can either white label a mobile platform, like an AdMarvel, for example, or they can go out and start to partner with these mobile ad networks, so people like InMobi, etc. Or they can actually, they'll have to start creating their own SDKs and start passing that out to the publishers that they have on the web. So as you can see, to sort of summarize these slides, I thought it'd be pretty valuable just to go over some of them. It's definitely an overcrowded marketplace. There's a lot of different players that do a lot of different things. And sort of when you step back and say, okay, who are the real players of the ecosystem? We almost forgot about the advertisers and publishers themselves. And these are the people that sort of help. So everything in the middle of that chart essentially is what's adding the value and connecting the two together. So I'd say demand-side capabilities are likely to combine. The three areas I highlighted here is creative optimization, which we talked about. So people, companies like Terracent and Tumri, who are optimizing creatives on the fly. The data optimization platforms. So these are people like Quantcast and Adchemy that will leverage data to help build, say landing pages on the fly based on whatever data they know about that user. And then the demand-side platforms themselves will start to probably combine the value that you see in creative optimization and data optimization so that you don't have to go to multiple places. An example is Xpost One partnered with Tumri to be able to allow advertisers to get access to creative optimization without going directly to Tumri. Data becomes ubiquitous and commoditized. So the three areas I highlighted here are the data aggregators, the data suppliers, and then the sharing data through Facebook and Share This. So what happens here is the value of the data is only as valuable as exclusive as it is. So if you allow BlueKai data, if you allow anyone to access that, you hold this auction model, all of a sudden that price is going to drop because that advertiser can now get that same data through different networks, and it's not as valuable anymore. If they had their own proprietary data, then they would start to spend more for that because that's their own bundle. Life gets tougher for agencies. There's more and more tools that come into play between the agencies and the actual publishers on where they're running their inventory. So you have the media buying desks that we talked about that are trying to make buys more effective across demand-side platforms. But now agencies have to figure out, do we create our own trading desks like a Cadreon, or do we just try to work with one individual DSP? Publishers need to leverage data for their benefits. And again, this is, how does my data become as exclusive as possible? Do I sell it raw? Do I brand it? Do I target better? How do I really get higher CPMs for this whole right side of the chart, which is on the publisher side platform? For these vertical networks, online ad networks, everyone that has specific relationships with publishers, they need to figure out, how do I keep this and make my data as valuable as possible, rather than allowing everyone to access it at any price. Now, essentially, hopefully it gives you a better idea of how you can start to look at products and say, okay, maybe now when when BMW is looking at that X6, they know how to target that soccer mom, and when they look at the Z3, they know how to target that athlete. That might be the target market for them. They're able to leverage different types of data across the creative, building that creative on the fly, reaching those specific audiences across different exchanges and demand-side platforms, as well as vertical networks.